Hey, Park, welcome to the show.
Jason, thanks for having me here, man.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. So tell us who you are, what you do.
Well, I am Park Howell, and I am what my clients call the world's most industrious storyteller because I've been using story really throughout my entire career in one way, shape, or form for about 40 years. And now I consult, teach, coach, and speak on the power of story to leaders around the world. But before that, I was definitely an agency guy running my own agency for 20 years in Phoenix, Arizona.
What made you start your agency back in the 90s?
Well, I studied first music composition and theory and then communications at Washington State University. And I knew I always wanted to be in the creative arts. I call it the commerce of arts, if you will, where I could use creativity to make a living. And of course, advertising was the most direct route to do that, figuring I'd never make any money as a composer. And so I started my career after graduating as I worked for a lot of agencies, first up in Seattle and then down in Phoenix as a writer, account executive, media planner, buyer. Sometimes I had to play attorney to get us paid. Did a little bit of everything because I always worked with small to mid-sized agencies. And at the time, I always was like, Jason, God, what a bummer. I want to work for the big boys and do all this great work and whatever. But in hindsight, I learned so much by working with these small up and coming shops that then I launched mine in 1995 in Phoenix because I'm not good at working for people, as in bosses. I've always liked to be my own boss. And so, yeah, I ran my agency in Phoenix for 20 years.
What made you want to make a switch and kind of leave the agency behind and kind of go to do something else?
Yeah, we started, like I said, in 95. So we were very much of a traditional ad agency. And that's what I was really raised on. TV, radio, print, outdoor direct mail, public relations, events, that kind of thing. And once the digital world hit in the early 2000s in a big way, with e-commerce, website development, social media just kicking off then, I was at a bit of a loss. I was like, okay, new medium. How do we work this? And I was kind of working it the old way that we would do it with traditional advertising, and it wasn't working. And I got very frustrated. And as it kept growing exponentially, I was looking for an answer like, okay, how do you communicate in this new, really noisy world? And like I tell my clients, I said, it used to be that you own the influence of mass media, but now the masses are becoming the media. And we got to figure out how to do a better job communicating in this world. And I was flummoxed. And so I went in search for an answer. I was lucky that our son Parker was going to film school at Chapman University, a very, very prominent film school in Orange, California. And about the same time, he started in 2006. And I said, hey, man, send me your books and your recorded lectures when you're done with them, since I'm paying for them, because I want to know, what does Hollywood know about storytelling that maybe we in the sales, marketing, advertising, branding world should know, to be able to hack through the noise and truly hook into the hearts of our audiences in this new mass media of social media. And I started studying story big time then, saw the implications, saw the power of it, and realized that very few people in our world understood how to use these proven frameworks. And so I started teaching my own customers how to use them. And then Arizona State University came calling because they saw the success we were having with it. And they invited me to teach a master's course on it as an adjunct professor, which I did for 5 years while still running my ad agency. And I realized then, Jason, that I had outgrown my career as an ad guy and had grown into becoming a teacher and coach. And I loved it. I just absolutely love teaching leaders how to use it, and then seeing the success they were having with these frameworks. And that's when I decided, I'm going to wind down my agency and do this full time. So in 2016, after 20 years of running Park & Co., I literally just pivoted away from it. I didn't sell it. All my people went on and got great jobs at other agencies. Some of them still work with me today in a virtual way. But now all I do is consult, teach, coach, and speak on the power of story for purpose-driven brands around the world.
I'm curious, why didn't you want to sell it or sell it to your employees or give it to your employees?
Well, there are a lot of strings attached in every one of those scenarios. So if I was to sell it at the time, I was 55 years old and people thought I was nuts. I would have been beholden to whoever bought it for the next 5 years to continue building something that I didn't believe in anymore. I felt like digital marketing and that really sucked the creative juice, the creative life out of advertising as we know it. And it certainly did in my own life. And then my folks that were working with me, honestly, I don't, of maybe one of them could have really taken it and run with it. The others, I don't think we're in to owning an agency and putting up with all the stuff that you have to do in running an agency. A
Mhm.
lot of them went out on their own and are still today just, solopreneurs, freelancers doing their thing. So I didn't have the right people around me that wanted to buy it or to take it. And I didn't want to be beholden to someone that came in and bought it, quite honestly.
Gotcha. But fair enough. Let's talk about stories and telling the right story, because a lot of people listening, they, to the outside world, they look like every other Me Too agency out there, every other Me Too business. Like it's hard to separate them from another person. They're all talking about, we have the best people, we have the best process, we have the best portfolio, and look at all our fucking awards we have. Right. And I always look at it and I'm like, God, man, you guys are telling the same damn story.
Yeah.
And there's lots of people that have, frameworks and that kind of stuff. Walk us through, how can the listeners tell better stories that really connect with the people that they're going after?
Well, it's a couple things, Jason. First and foremost, a lot of agencies, a lot of people say, "Oh, we're great storytellers. We tell stories all the time." In actuality, they're not telling stories. They're anding their audiences to death. They never get out of exposition, and so, big deal. Number two, I think clarity trumps creativity now, and let me clarify that for you. Again, going back to when I first got into the advertising world, it was a very kind of exclusive industry. As you know, it's hard to get jobs for good agencies. It's hard to find the right clients to do really great work for. And so you had this limited field and creativity was king because it could really stand out. Well, you go online now and you look at, boy, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever, there are hysterical creative memes produced by zillions of people that aren't in our industry. And they're really, really, really good. So to me, creativity has become kind of democratized. It's really hard to stand out. So I think in this day and age, it's about clarity. And if you are not using the proper frameworks in communication, and I always look at narrative frameworks because of how they work on our brain, then you can call yourself a storyteller all day long. But if you're not actually using a framework like the one we always begin with is the and, but, therefore, that if you're not using these, then you are not creating the clarity for your clients that they need to be able to stand out in this massive amount of creativity out there to really move the needle. And so most agencies sell themselves on creativity. Creativity is a dime a dozen anymore. Awards don't mean anything anymore. It's like, how do you really clearly tell the story for that customer of yours and for your own agency for that matter?
Yeah. So walk us through kind of the clarity part,
Yeah.
and, how we can, as they're listening, how we can actually do this.
All right. Real quick sort of anthropologic history lesson. So here we are. We're Homo sapiens, which means we are essentially storytelling apes. We are the only beings that we know of that think, plan, organize, and act using story. Think about every sale is a fictional story that you are getting that fellow Homo sapiens storytelling ape to buy into. And then it is your job as the brand to deliver on the promises you make in that fictional account to make it actual, right? So we have this limbic survival brain that is essentially a story processing brain. It is constantly scanning our environment for trouble, essentially problems. And then is it in a survival mode? Do I need to fight? Do I need to flight? Do I need to freeze? Or is there an opportunity here? So when we are not speaking to that limbic brain that is being overwhelmed with content coming at us today in the setup problem resolution dynamic, then we are just ricocheting off of it. It's not going to pay attention to it. And I don't care how creative your advertising is, if you're not playing to that pattern seeking, problem solving, limbic buying brain. And that's where the and, but, therefore comes in. It uses the three forces of story, of agreement, contradiction, and consequence that, again, this survival, decision-making, buying, subconscious brain uses to make meaning out of the madness of being human beings. So when we are out there and we're just bombarding it with more creativity and memes and whatever, it might laugh, but it doesn't stick. So we use the technology of the and, but, therefore, that algorithm to be able to, as I mentioned earlier, hack through the noise and hook into the hearts of your audiences.
Gotcha. And that's the and, but, therefore, and what?
That's it. That's called the ABT framework. And here's how you use it.
Okay.
The and is your statement of agreement. Think of it as setup or act one of any sort of message. You want it to be written from your audience's point of view, and you want to demonstrate to your audience that you understand who they are and appreciate what they want in life, this shared vision, the shared reality that you are acknowledging in their world to get them to do what you're doing right now. Nodding your head. Agreement. Yes, that's exactly right, Park. Then you add the but, and that is the plot twist. This is the problem, the contradiction, the conflict. But you're frustrated because of this major problem that is keeping you from getting what you want. Now what you've really done is you've triggered that limbic brain saying, okay, you've invited me into this story, my statement of agreement. You've punched me in the nose with the problem I've been trying to solve for. Now, what the hell's the solution? It's begging you. Therefore, your statement of consequence is, therefore, imagine what life is going to be like when you get it by doing this with us, or buying this product or service, or whatever. So what you've done with the and, but, therefore is you've used the three forces of story, agreement, contradiction, consequence, to hook into the limbic buying brain. And you have told that story from your audience's point of view. What's in it for them? Why in the hell should they care? So this precludes you from bombarding them with a bunch of bullet point lists and features and functions and BS that they don't care about. They actually don't care about your offering. They only care about the outcome. What's in it for them? And so I think that's where most agencies and most brands fall down, is when they do their brand positioning, it's all about them. In reality, they need to do the positioning from their audience's point of view using this simple 3-step framework.
So let's kind of put this into kind of some context, or kind of pull this full circle so people can kind of see it. I launched a video this morning. It's called the Budget Buster Method.
Mm-hmm.
And, I guess the setup is, or you tell me if this is the setup or the but. The biggest frustration people have is when they're wasting a ton of time with the wrong prospect, whether it be days, months, years, right? Only to find out that they don't have the budget because they never asked. Right? Which is, I mean, you remember this, I'm sure you did it. I did it several times. And then I finally was like, I'm frustrated with this. I'm going to get the budget from the prospect every single time within the first 30 minutes. So then I know, what their budget is. So I can actually raise my price to the budget, which is amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many times have you talked to a client and you're like, you're like, oh, your budget's $1 million? Man, I was going to charge you 100. So let me come up to $1 million.
Or the exact opposite.
Or the opposite.
You're asking for $1 million worth of services and you got $10,000. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. You want the Death Star Darth Vader and you want to pay $1,000 for the website? No, thank you. So how would you use that framework, the and, but, therefore for this?
Awesome. Let's walk you through it. So Jason, I'd ask you, who is your audience for this video?
Frustrated agency owners.
Okay. Agency owners. All right. What do they want relative to what information you're offering them?
What do they ultimately want, or what do they want from that short outcome?
What do they want from that short outcome from that video? So what we're doing is we're doing story strategy right now. So I'm going to be talking to frustrated agency owners. What they want relative to what I'm going to share with them in this video is what?
They want to make sure they're not wasting their time.
And why is that important to them?
So they can put their time and effort into the prospects that they actually want.
But why don't they currently have that? What's their major problem?
They don't have a system in order to figure out the prospect's budget.
Therefore, how are you going to help them?
I'm going to show them the budget buster method so they can get the budget 99% of the time.
Okay. So then what I would do is I'd go back to that script and I would begin from the agency owner's point of view. Hi, Jason here. You run a dynamic ad agency. You want to keep it positive, right? And if you could identify that ideal customer with the right budget, then you will experience exponential growth. But you're super frustrated because you're not identifying that right audience, wasting lots of time on talking to prospects that don't have the budgets you need simply because you don't have a system in place to identify them. Therefore, imagine in the next 2 months landing 3 ideal customers to build out that revenue machine you're looking to build with me and Budget Busters. I'm going to show you the exact method I use to identify the ideal customers. You want to learn? Boom. So that was a little bit longer. You can do that in under 15 seconds. And what you've done is use the 3 forces of story. First, starting ideally, with your audience. You are an agency owner running a dynamic agency. So you're saying, kudos, way to go, man. You're doing your thing. And if you can identify that ideal customer with the right budgets, then you will, 4x your growth over the next 6 months. All right. All statement of agreement, all like, yes, yes, yes. That's what I want. That's what I want. Now you pull the rug out from underneath them, but you're super frustrated because you're not identifying these ideal customers because you don't have a system in place to do so. Therefore, imagine if you could land 3 in the next 2 months by simply following this proven method I've got for budget busting, I'm going to show you how right now in this 5-minute video. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, I like that. And you're constantly going back from what they want to their frustration, right? And you're just kind of playing on that rather than being
play
all
off the
negative
emotion of it. We're always selling. So often people fall into the trap of selling to logic and reason. And that's not what buys. What buys is emotion. And then you justify that purchase with logic and reason. And that's what you're going to do with the rest of the video. So you're going to set them up, playing to that emotion. You want this, but you don't have it because of this. Therefore, imagine if you get it when you do this with me. I'm going to show you how. Step 1, boom. Step 2, now the logic and reason comes in, but you've hooked the limbic survival brain by speaking directly to them and playing to their emotion, not their logic or reason.
Yeah. Now, I really like that. I never thought about, the different elements in the different stories. I've always done it where, I just, it's very easy to think and, but, and therefore, and it's pretty slick how that works. I've always thought of going, all right, what does the person actually want? What do they want to avoid? How does it make them feel? Because I believe people make decisions based on making them feel good or to avoid that pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, I always liked of kind of going, well, why should you listen to me as well, right? And I think people talk too much about that, honestly, though. I mean, you see that in social media, be like, check out all the, like, look at all the stuff I've done, blah, 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 blah. And then you're kind of a little unrelatable to people too, I think.
Who cares? I mean, Jason, here's the real wake-up call for all marketers out there is people actually, I hate to say it, don't care about you. They don't care about your brand. They don't care about your offering. They only care about what's in it for them. And we do get caught up. Now, there's always places for your resume out there and your social proof and so forth to demonstrate to people that, yeah, you do know what you're doing. And simply by watching your video and talking to you, you're like, hey, man, this guy's got it going on. I should be paying attention to him. So yes, you need to sprinkle some of that stuff in there. Give you an example of this. I was doing work with Sharp Electronics, teaching 135 of their sales and marketing folks. And this was just coming out of COVID. So it was a complete virtual session and walking them through the ABT and my 5 primal elements of a short story for big impact, which is an expanded ABT. And to demonstrate it, all I do is pull up one of their landing pages for one of their offerings. And on it was this big, gigantic, looked like a very expensive copying machine system, whatever. And they had, oh God, they had, I think, 81 words on the landing page. All it was talking about is how wonderful Sharp is. And we do this, and we do that, and we're recognized for this awards, blah, 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 blah. They're assuming that you're going to go, oh, Sharp, you're so great. Thank you for coming into my life. Let me write you a $250,000 check for that thing. Doesn't work. So what I did is I rewrote it from the reader's point of view. And I don't have it right in front of me right here.
You started with the question?
No, not in this case. It was like, you want productivity and all your company, and a comping system that will deliver efficiency, cost savings day in and day out. But your productivity is currently stuck on pause because you're working with antiquated equipment. Therefore, check out Sharp's I was able to cut that by 2/3, use the and but therefore, set up problem resolution from the audience's point of view. And one of their national sales managers literally took a screenshot of my ABT, lifted it, put it into a sales presentation, took it in the next morning, that Friday morning. On Monday, I received an email saying, I don't know what kind of voodoo you were teaching, but I have been trying to close a piece of business for 6 months and getting nowhere. I finally went back in. I refocused my sales presentation using the very ABT that you wrote and shared there, and I landed the business within an hour. And he goes, the only thing I did differently was use the ABT. And I hear these sort of anecdotal stories all of the time. And the reason why is he wasn't boring his prospect with a bunch of bullet points, features, functions, and how great we are. He was speaking from their point of view, solution selling, using the ABT to hook into that limbic buying brain.
Yeah. What I've found in the past works really well, especially on landing pages or whatever, is to start with a question, because then it puts it back on them. And they're going to psychologically answer that question, be like, yeah, I want that, or I want to avoid that.
Yeah.
Rather than check out how cool I am. What's an example of a big company? I'm curious, what big companies out there, or what's one big company out there that we all know that you feel that have mastered this?
Oh boy, I don't think any of them have mastered it. I think, well, if you're looking at storytelling, I think one of the best agencies, let's start with an agency, then I'll come back to the companies. I think an agency that does it better than most is Venable Bells Partners up in San Francisco. And their work for Audi is just absolutely sensational. And they've got story structure. And I was talking to Paul Venables about this, and he goes, oh, it's not really something we think about. And I go, well, but I can break down every one of your spots using the ABT, using the 5 primal elements, and even the hero's journey. And you guys are following this format exactly. And he goes, I think we're just really good intuitive storytellers because we actually don't have a framework that we follow. And so I would have to agree with him because they're very good. And I would say we are all intuitive storytellers as Homo sapiens storytelling apes. I just want people to become intentional about using it with the ABT. Now, having said that, a campaign I recently saw, not from Venables, But it was FedEx. I was watching, I watch golf now and again, especially the majors. And FedEx has a campaign out of 3 spots that they do a really nice job of telling an actual story about bailing out a customer from a major problem because they were able to deliver for them. And if you go through each one of those 30-second spots, I wrote a blog post on businessofstory.com about it, you will see the ABT framework there. Now, I've never taught them the framework. It just naturally came out of them. But I do work with large brands like the Home Depot, Walmart, Canada, US Air Force, Mayo Clinic, and others. And all I'm doing is, I didn't invent this. This has been around since the beginning of time. I'm simply revealing it to them and showing them how to use this framework. So I don't think there are a lot of really great top-notch storytelling brands out there. You might throw, Apple used to be, I don't think they're as good as they were before. Certainly Patagonia is good in there. Nike sometimes is good at it. But I can't really go and say, here's any one stellar storytelling company out there. There are a lot of hits and misses, I'd say.
Yeah, I agree with you on Apple. Steve Jobs, when he was there, they were great storytellers.
Yeah.
And just making it very simple. 1,000 songs in your pocket, right? Like,
yeah.
What? Like, how is that possible?
Because he's talking about the outcome, right?
Exactly.
He was selling the outcome, not the product.
Yeah, now they really feature on how fast it is, and they're going backwards from what Microsoft used to do and what Steve used to sell against, which is, from a marketer, and I'm just like, guys, come on, get that
well,
right.
Look what Apple did with that crushing creativity ad, their iPad ad that just came out a couple of weeks ago, that they got so much pushback on that they actually had to come out and apologize. And some people were saying, well, Park, you're blind to this. They did that on purpose. Look at all the buzz they're getting about it, And I go, I don't know. I don't think they did. I think they were trying to be clever, and they out-clevered themselves. And, the thing to me about it is, what was the technology innovation they were selling? Nothing. They were selling thinness. I mean, I got a 2016 iPad that's not even an inch thick. Do I really need a thinner iPad? Does it really make any difference?
I'd still use an iPhone 12. I'm like, and they're what, 15 or 16.
There
I'm
you
like,
go.
well, what's the big innovation?
Yeah.
And the story doesn't really compel me. Like, I remember watching something of Steve, and I had a bunch of people that used to work for Steve that actually worked for my agency for many years. And I remember them always telling me, it was like, they always would say, he always admired Nike and the way they told stories. And what Nike did a really good job at, and if you think about it, they were a commodity, right? They're fucking commodity of selling shoes. What made their shoes any different? But their advertising, just like Red Bull, right? Like, they highlight great athletes or great athletics. And that's what we've always tried to portray, on this podcast, is highlight great agency owners, great guests, great stories that they can tell. So people are like, oh, I'm not alone anymore. Like,
right.
Really, there's thousands of people that have this challenge. I'm not the only one. So if there's all these people that have this challenge, I can actually get through it. Like, that's the whole purpose of the podcast, and interviewing people with, really, and some people that come on the show, they're like, what are the questions you're going to ask? I was like, I didn't even know it for like a minute before.
I just read a book that's been around for a while, and I loved it. I've been studying Stoicism a little bit, and it was part of kind of a recommended reading. And maybe you've read this, Jason, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Have you read that book?
Well, I live that.
I think every agency owner should read it. Yeah. And here's the main takeaway that I got from Mark Manson's book. And that was, look, at life is nothing but a series of problems. We are constantly, every day, taking a dog for a walk and you don't feel like it. That's kind of a problem. You got to go vacuum and your vacuum cleaner's not working. That's a problem. You got to show up to your agency and you got a pissed off customer. That's a problem. So we are constantly solving problems. His point in there is get really super focused on what you do, what you're good at, what you like to solve, and then solve good problems. Get the bad problems out of your life, or minimalize them. And he says bad problems crop up when you don't have your own shit together, when you don't have that focus for your agency, when you're trying to be all things to all people, and now all of a sudden these really crappy problems show up and they exhaust you. They take your vigor out of you. But when you're solving good problems, hey, Jason, I've got a campaign and I do have $100,000 I want to spend over the next 3 weeks to get this thing going. But here's our big problem that we got to solve for. Cool. Now you're engaged, you find the flow, and you get in and do it. And so I think that's begins by really understanding what your story is and what problems do you solve that you are tickled about solving for your customers, and you can solve them better than anybody else in your little niche market. Niche down and go and start solving good problems and stop dealing with so many bad problems.
Awesome. Well, great advice. And Park, thanks so much for coming on and walking us through this framework of telling better stories. And for everyone listening, make sure you go check out Park's stuff. And so you guys can tell better stories, because we don't want to tell the story everybody else is telling.
That's right.
Because then you're not standing out. You're that blade of grass in a huge meadow that no one will ever know which one. But if you want to be that Sasquatch that I have in my meadow, that will stand out a little bit more and piss off your neighbors, but it will stand out. Make sure you go do that. And until next time, have a swank day.
I hope you enjoyed this content. If you want more content like this, make sure you click on the link on the screen or check out your most popular podcast platform where the full episode is there. And until next time, have a swank day. What are you doing? Go check it out.